The glass never broke. That was the part I remembered later. It did not crash against the floor or scatter across the kitchen tile. It only tipped over, soft and ordinary. When my elbow caught it reaching for the bank statement Robert had tried to hide beneath his dinner plate. Water ran across Claire Donovan's sleeve. She gasped like I had slapped her. My daughter Sophie froze across the table, her fork still in her hand, her eyes moving from me to her father and then to the woman sitting beside him. And then I saw the number, $18,600. Gone from our family reserve. Robert stood up slowly. His face went hard, in that way it did when he wanted the room to understand he was done being questioned. He pointed at Claire, the woman he had brought into my home and introduced as a consultant, and said, "Apologize to Claire or leave." Claire's mouth trembled, but her eyes gave her away. She was enjoying it. I looked back down at the statement. The memo line read, C. D. Condo Unit 614, Deposit. So I folded my napkin, I picked up my purse, and I said, "Then I'll leave." Subscribe if you know Betrayal always leaves a receipt. Because that night, I did not go upstairs to cry into a pillow. I drove to a small hotel near my attorney's office. My name is Maggie Lawson. I was 52 years old when my marriage finally stopped pretending to be a marriage. It did not end with some dramatic confession. It did not end because I found lipstick on a collar or a hotel key in a jacket pocket. It ended at my own dinner table, with my 15-year-old daughter watching, while my husband told me to apologize to the woman he had been funding behind my back. For most of our marriage, I was the quiet engine under Robert Lawson's life. I kept the books, I paid the bills, I remembered the insurance deadlines, the tax folders, the school meetings, the doctor appointments, and the birthdays Robert forgot until I reminded him. I knew when the mortgage cleared. I knew when the business insurance renewed. I knew which drawer held Sophie's vaccination records and which folder held Robert's old loan documents. Robert liked to call himself self-made, and maybe part of him was. But in the beginning, there was not much to brag about. He was a subcontractor with an old pickup truck, a bad knee, and a wallet that stayed thin no matter how hard he worked. He had more confidence than cash, and some days, confidence was all we had. Back then, he used to say I was the only person who believed in him. Maybe I was. I worked part-time in a small accounting office, then came home to a baby on my hip, dishes in the sink, and Robert sitting at the kitchen table with receipts spread out in front of him like broken pieces of a life we were trying to build. I helped him sort every invoice. I wrote down every fuel charge. I made sure the first business loan did not bury us before his company had a chance to breathe. We were not rich. We were not rested. But we were a team. At least, I thought we were. 20 years later, Robert had a polished office, a newer truck every couple of years, and men in expensive jackets calling him a visionary over steak dinners he charged to the company card. He had employees who laughed too hard at his jokes, and clients who shook his hand like he had always belonged in rooms with leather chairs and private parking. And I was still the woman at home, keeping the real life from falling apart. I raised Sophie. I handled the school forms. I made the appointments. I cared for Robert's mother after her hip surgery because Robert said he was too buried in work to take time off. I paid the household bills. I watched the accounts. I kept everything steady while he called it ambition. I was not perfect. I do not want to pretend I was some saint in an apron, smiling through every disappointment. I got tired. I got resentful. I swallowed things I should have said out loud. I convinced myself that long marriages had cold seasons, and that distance did not always mean betrayal. But I was loyal. I believed in the home we built. Robert used to tell me, "Everything I build is because you kept us standing." For years, I held on to that sentence like it was proof that he still saw me. Then one day, he stopped saying it. He started saying I would not understand business. He started saying I was too emotional about money. He said I was stuck in old ways of thinking. He said Claire understood growth. Claire understood strategy. Claire understood what it took to move in bigger circles. And when I asked why one woman's name kept appearing in conversations that used to belong to us, he told me to stop acting like every woman near him was a threat. Claire Donovan had been hired as a strategic consultant. That was the title Robert gave her. She was 38, polished, sharp, and very good at making Robert feel like the man he wanted to be. She called him a visionary in that soft, admiring voice women use when they know a man is starving for applause. At first, I was polite. That is the trap, sometimes. You do not want to become the jealous wife in the story he is already preparing to tell. So you smile. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You tell yourself you are being mature. You tell yourself trust means not asking too many questions. And then the guilty person starts doing what guilty people always do before the truth comes out. They turn your suspicion into your flaw. Robert began coming home later, but never from anywhere suspicious. At least not according to him. It was always a client dinner, a site review, a late vendor meeting, some business problem only he could solve, apparently with cologne on his shirt and his hair still damp from a shower he claimed he took at the office gym. He changed the password on his business laptop, even though I had helped him prepare tax documents for years. His phone no longer rested face up on the dinner table. It stayed in his hand, in his jacket pocket, or turned face down beside his plate like a secret trying not to breathe. At first, I noticed little things. Then I noticed the pattern. Robert stopped talking to me about decisions. He announced them. When I asked about a charge I did not recognize, he sighed like I was a child interrupting grown-up business. When I asked why Claire's consulting retainer had doubled, he said I was embarrassing him. When I asked why so many meetings were happening on weekends, he said I should be grateful he still came home at all. That was the cruel part. He was not only hiding something, he was teaching me to feel guilty for seeing it. Claire became part of the air in our house, without ever officially belonging there. Robert mentioned her at breakfast. Robert quoted her at dinner. Robert laughed at her texts while leaving mine unanswered from across the room. Sophie saw it before I wanted her to. One night, she looked up from her homework and asked, "Why does Dad laugh at Claire's texts but barely answer yours?" I had no answer. And when your child asks a question like that, silence feels like a confession you never meant to make. Then the money started moving. A consulting retainer went up without a clear reason. A business credit card carried restaurant charges nowhere near job sites. A furniture payment appeared that made no sense, then a parking garage fee near the harbor. Then a transfer to a property management company Robert described as temporary housing for out-of-town contractors. It sounded reasonable if you wanted badly enough to believe it. And I did. For a while. But the dates kept lining up with the nights Robert missed dinner, school events, and one appointment with Sophie's counselor that he had promised he would attend. He said he was buried in work. The charges said he had been near the harbor. When I asked again, his face hardened. "This is why I don't involve you in real decisions anymore," he said. Just like that, a fair question became an insult. A bank statement became an attack. My concern became instability. So I stopped asking questions the way he wanted me to ask them. I began writing things down. I did not hack his phone. I did not follow him. I did not break into accounts or turn myself into some reckless woman chasing pain in the dark. I had too much to lose for that. I used what I had every legal right to see: joint account statements, family email alerts, bills sent to our home, old tax records, Sophie's school calendar, medical appointments, bank notifications that still had my name attached. Robert thought I was getting quiet because I was afraid. He was wrong. I was getting quiet because the story was starting to organize itself. I did not have the whole truth yet, but I had something more dangerous to Robert than one accusation. I had a pattern. The first real piece of proof arrived on a Thursday morning that looked like any other Thursday. I was standing at the kitchen counter with cold coffee in my hand when the bank alert came through. It came from the marital reserve account, the one Robert and I had opened years earlier for taxes, Sophie's tuition, insurance premiums, and emergencies that did not care whether we were ready. The transfer was for $18,600. The recipient was North Harbor Property Management. The memo line read, C. D. Condo Unit 614 Deposit. I stared at those letters for a long time. C. D. Claire Donovan. Not a contractor, not a supplier, not a business expense. A woman with a condo number. My hands did not shake right away. That came later. In that first moment, everything inside me went still. There are moments in a marriage when your heart understands the truth before your mind has the mercy to accept it. That was one of them. I printed the statement. Then I printed the older charges I had been trying to explain away. The furniture store, the flowers, the parking garage, the weekend restaurant bills, the consulting bonus that landed in Claire's name 2 days before Robert told me cash flow was tight. There was also an email from the property management company, sent by mistake to our family address. It mentioned move-in access and a harbor view unit. Robert had always loved phrases like temporary housing. They sounded clean, practical, businesslike, easy to hide behind. I placed everything into a blue folder and slid it into my work bag. That night, Robert brought Claire to our house. He said they needed to discuss a project. But Claire arrived in a black dress, without a laptop, without a folder, without even pretending this was work. She walked into my kitchen like she already knew the shape of it. She knew which cabinet held the wine glasses. She knew Robert hated ice in his water. She knew enough to smile at me like a guest and look at him like a wife. Dinner was quiet, and the way a room gets quiet before something breaks. I reached for the bank statement. My elbow clipped a glass, and water spilled across Claire's sleeve. She gasped, like I had done it on purpose. Sophie froze. Robert stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Before I could say a word, I saw the memo line again. C. D. Condo. Unit 614. Robert pointed at Claire and told me to apologize. He said I had embarrassed him. He said Claire was one of the most important people in his company. He said I had insulted someone who was helping him build his future. Then he said, apologize to Claire or leave. That was when I understood what he had really done. This was not just an affair anymore. This was humiliation with an audience. I looked at Sophie. Her eyes were wet, but she was trying so hard not to cry. That hurt worse than Robert's voice. A child should never have to sit at a dinner table and watch one parent beg the other for basic dignity. I folded my napkin. I picked up my purse and I said, then I'll leave, in the car. I did not call Robert. I did not call Claire. I did not call a friend and fall apart in the parking lot. I called Elaine Porter, a divorce attorney I knew through a woman who had survived a hidden assets case 3 years earlier. Elaine was 58, calm, and not easily impressed by panic. I told her about the condo payment. She asked one question. Do you have the records legally? I said yes. Then she said, do not go back tonight. Do not warn him. Bring every record you have. So I drove to a small hotel near her office with the blue folder on the passenger seat. Robert thought I had left the house. He had no idea I had just left the marriage. The next morning, Maggie sat across from Elaine Porter in an office that felt too calm for what she had carried into it. The room smelled like coffee, paper, and old wooden shelves. There were framed degrees on the wall, but Elaine did not have the look of someone trying to impress a frightened woman. She had the look of someone who had heard every version of betrayal and knew the only thing that mattered now was what could be proven. Elaine was 58, with silver hair pulled back at the base of her neck and eyes that did not waste sympathy. She was not cold. That would be the wrong word. She was steady. And steady was exactly what Maggie needed. She opened the blue folder and spread the first few documents across her desk. The condo payment, the furniture charges, the parking garage, the email from North Harbor Property Management. Elaine read each one without changing expression. Then she looked at Maggie and said, we are going to separate emotion from evidence. For the first time since that dinner,
Maggie felt like the floor had stopped moving. Elaine explained things slowly, because good lawyers know panic makes people miss important words.
According to Elaine, in their state, financial records could matter. Hidden assets could matter. Marital money spent on another woman could matter. A parent's real history of caring for a child could matter. If Robert had lied about income, spending, or custody, that could affect the settlement, child support, attorney fees, and how the court viewed his credibility. But Elaine made something clear right away. Maggie was not to get reckless. No guessing passwords. No touching Robert's private phone. No trying to sneak into business accounts she did not have legal access to. No ambushing Claire. No angry voicemails. No late-night texts. Robert's attorney could someday read out loud and twist into something ugly. Pain makes people careless, Elaine said. We cannot afford careless. So Maggie brought what she had the right to bring. Joint bank statements, family email alerts, tax returns filed under both names, bills mailed to the house, bank records from accounts where her name was attached, school records, medical appointments, text messages Robert had sent to her own phone, old company documents Robert had handed her over the years when he wanted help preparing tax folders. Elaine looked through the stack and nodded once. This is enough to start. That sentence mattered. Not enough to win. Not enough to breathe easy. Just enough to start. By the end of that week, Elaine brought in Marcia Bennett, a forensic accountant who looked like she had been born unimpressed. Marcia was 61, with tired eyes, a blunt voice, and reading glasses hanging from a silver chain. She did not waste time pretending financial betrayal was complicated when the paper trail was right there. Men like Robert always thought the same thing. If they called a personal expense business development, it became invisible. Marcia treated every bank statement like a witness under oath. She started with the condo deposit. $18,600 had left the marital reserve account, moved into a secondary business account, and then landed at North Harbor Property Management. The memo line had not been erased. Robert had not expected Maggie to look closely enough. That was his first mistake. C. D. Condo. Unit 614. From there, Marcia followed the money outward. Claire had received a consulting bonus that did not match any written contract. Her monthly retainer had nearly tripled in 8 months, without a clear increase in work. The condo appeared in Robert's internal notes as contractor housing, but there were no contractors listed on the lease schedule. The furniture payment came from a business credit card. The parking garage was near the harbor, not near any job site. Several restaurant charges matched nights Robert claimed he was meeting vendors. Maggie listened in silence. There is a strange pain in hearing your life translated into transactions. A dinner becomes a charge. A lie becomes a date. A woman becomes initials in a memo line. The marriage you thought was breaking slowly turns out to have been leaking money for months. Then Marcia found the LLC R.L. Development Advisory. It had been created 6 months earlier, small, quiet, boring enough to avoid attention. That was the point. A portion of Robert's income had been routed through it before reaching his personal accounts. On paper, his cash flow looked weaker than it really was. In reality, money was being parked out of sight. Marcia set the file down and looked at Elaine. He's preparing to say the business is struggling. Elaine nodded. To reduce support, Maggie felt something settle in her chest. Not fear, exactly. Something colder than fear. Robert was not only cheating, he was planning the divorce before she even knew she was in one. A few days later, Robert's answer came through his attorney. It was exactly the kind of answer Elaine expected. He denied hiding money. He denied wasting marital funds. He said the condo payment had been a legitimate business expense. He said Claire was a consultant. He said Maggie was emotional, jealous, and confused about how his company operated. Then he demanded 50-50 custody of Sophie. That was when Maggie almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so perfectly Robert. He had missed dentist appointments, therapy sessions, parent-teacher conferences, and school pickups more times than Maggie could count. He did not know the name of Sophie's counselor without checking his phone. He had once called her math teacher, the older woman with glasses, even though Maggie had introduced him to her twice. He had missed Sophie's volleyball banquet because of a client dinner that Marcia later matched to a restaurant near North Harbor. But now, on paper, he wanted equal parenting time. Elaine did not look surprised. "He may be doing this to reduce child support," she said. "So we document the truth." So Maggie brought calendars, not feelings, calendars. Every school conference, every doctor visit, every therapy appointment, every time Robert canceled pickup, every night he said he was trapped in a business dinner, every weekend he claimed he was working while his card showed charges near Claire's condo. Maggie was careful with Sophie. She did not ask her daughter to spy. She did not ask her to choose. She did not tell her about the other child. Not then. That kind of truth is not something you throw at a 15-year-old because you are bleeding. Maggie simply protected the records that already existed. And then Marcia found the line that changed everything. It was small, almost boring. C. D. Support private agreement. A monthly payment. Same date every month. Not large enough to draw attention, just steady enough to matter. Elaine subpoenaed the related records. Maggie knew from Elaine's face when the documents came back that whatever was inside them was bad. Elaine did not dramatize things. She never had to. She simply closed the office door, placed a folder on the desk, and told Maggie to sit down. Claire Donovan had opened a child support file once. Then she had withdrawn it. Not because Robert was not the father, because Robert had agreed to pay privately. Inside the old file was a DNA test confirming Robert Lawson as the biological father of Caleb Donovan, a 3-year-old boy Maggie had never heard of. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Not Elaine, not Marcia, not Maggie. The room went quiet in that heavy way rooms do when a life has just split into before and after. Maggie looked at the paper and thought about every late night, every cologne-soaked excuse, every time Robert called her paranoid, every time he said Claire was only a consultant, every time he used the word business like it was a locked door and Maggie was too simple to hold a key. Now the door was open. The condo was not contractor housing. It was Claire's home. The payments were not business expenses. They were support for another life. The hidden LLC was not strategy. It was preparation. And Robert's sudden interest in custody was not fatherhood. It was math. That was the cruelty of it. He had not only betrayed Maggie as a wife, he had used their child, their money, and their home like pieces on a board he thought only he could see. But discovery has a way of turning private lies into public documents. Robert thought asking for custody would scare her. He thought it would make her emotional. He thought it would push her into negotiating from fear, the way he had pushed her for years at the kitchen table. Instead, it opened the door for Elaine to examine his entire life. From the outside, Maggie looked almost too calm. She drove Sophie to school. She went to work. She bought groceries. She made dinner. She answered Robert's texts with short, careful sentences. She did not call Claire. She did not post a single word online. She did not tell Sophie her father had another child. She kept the house steady because someone had to. That is the part people rarely understand. When a woman becomes quiet after betrayal, it does not always mean she is broken. Sometimes it means she is done wasting breath on someone who only respects paperwork. Underneath that calm surface, the case was growing teeth. Elaine organized the condo payment. Marcia mapped the hidden LLC. The child support file sat in a sealed folder. The DNA result was copied, logged, and protected. The custody calendar grew thicker. School emails, health insurance records, tax returns, credit card statements, and Robert's own messages started lining up in a way even a charming man could not talk around. Robert hated the silence. At first, he sent angry texts, then polite ones, then long, careful messages that sounded less like a husband and more like a man writing for a future judge. He told Maggie she was overreacting. He told her they could still handle things privately. He told her she was damaging Sophie. He told her she was making everything ugly. One afternoon, the message came through while Maggie was sitting in the parking lot outside Sophie's school. "You're making this ugly." Maggie read it once, then again. Then she typed back, "No, I'm making it documented." She did not add anything else. That was the first time Robert understood she was not begging anymore. After that, he asked to come by the house. He said they needed to talk like adults. Maggie agreed, but only after telling Elaine. The front door stayed unlocked. Her phone stayed nearby. She made coffee she did not plan to drink. If some habits survive longer than love. Robert arrived looking tired, but not humble. He still wore the expensive watch Claire had once complimented right in front of Maggie. He stood in the kitchen like he was trying to remember how to look like a husband. At first, he tried softness. He said things had gotten complicated. He said Claire had never meant to hurt anyone. He said Maggie was taking business records out of context. He said Sophie needed both parents. He said they should handle the divorce quietly, with dignity. That word almost made Maggie smile. Dignity. Men like Robert always remembered dignity after they ran out of secrecy. Maggie gave him nothing. No tears, no shouting, no shaking voice. Just silence. And when she did not react the way he wanted, the softness disappeared. He said if she kept pushing, he would force the sale of the house. He said he would take 50-50 custody. He said Sophie needed to see that her mother was not stable. He said no judge would reward a jealous woman trying to destroy a man's business. Maggie let him finish. Then she placed a copy of the custody calendar on the kitchen table. 47 canceled pickups in 14 months. 3 missed therapy appointments. 2 missed school conferences. 1 emergency room visit after Sophie sprained her wrist at volleyball practice, where Maggie sat beside her daughter for 3 hours, while Robert claimed he could not leave a meeting. Each entry had a date. Each date had the reason Robert gave. And beside several of those dates were card charges near North Harbor. Robert looked down at the calendar. His jaw tightened. "You've been tracking me." Maggie shook her head. "No, I've been raising our daughter." He had no answer for that. So Maggie placed the condo deposit statement beside the calendar. That was when his face changed. It was not fear yet. It was the moment right before fear, when a man realizes the room is much smaller than he thought. "You don't understand what that was," he said. Maggie looked at him with a calm she had paid for in humiliation. "Then explain it to the judge." That was the last thing she gave him that night. 2 days later, Elaine filed an emergency motion. According to her attorney, the account tied to the condo payment showed signs of dissipating marital assets. The court granted a temporary restriction while the money trail was reviewed. Robert found out when a transfer failed. Claire found out when the condo management office called about the next payment. And then Robert's phone began ringing. Claire did not want her name in a divorce file. She did not want to be subpoenaed. She did not want the private child support arrangement pulled into the open. She wanted Robert to fix it the way he had always fixed things, with money that did not fully belong to him. But this time, the money was frozen. That was the part Robert had not planned for. He had built 2 lives and convinced himself they would never touch. In one life, Maggie paid bills, raised Sophie, kept the calendar full, and made sure the house stayed warm. In the other, Claire lived in a harbor condo with new furniture, quiet payments, and a child support arrangement hidden behind polite words. For a while, Robert balanced both lives. Then the paper trail did what truth always does. It connected them. And when the court date arrived, Robert still believed he could talk his way through it. He had always been good in rooms full of men who wanted confidence to be the same thing as honesty. But this room was different. This time, Maggie was not the person he had to convince. The judge was. Robert came to court in his best navy suit. It was the suit he wore when he wanted people to believe he was the reasonable man in the room. Bank meetings, charity dinners, contractor awards. Anywhere a firm handshake and a calm smile could hide the parts of him he did not want anyone to inspect. He sat beside his attorney with that tired kind of confidence men get when they still believe their version of events deserves to go first. He wanted to look like a father under attack, a husband punished by a bitter wife, a businessman being dragged through the mud because he had moved on. Elaine let him have the performance for a while. Robert's attorney said Maggie was jealous. He said she misunderstood how business transactions worked. He said the condo payment was part of a temporary housing arrangement for out-of-town labor. He said Robert wanted equal custody because he loved Sophie and wanted to stay active in her life. Maggie sat still. She had learned something by then. A lie often sounds strongest right before the documents arrive. Elaine stood and opened the first folder. She started with the money. $18,600 had moved from the marital reserve account to North Harbor Property Management. The account was not some random business fund. It was the account Robert and Maggie had used for taxes, tuition, insurance, and emergencies. It was the account built to protect their family. The memo line was clear. C. D. Condo. Unit 614. Robert's attorney repeated the phrase temporary housing, as if saying it enough times could make it true. Elaine placed the lease into evidence. The occupant was Claire Donovan. The courtroom did not erupt. Real courtrooms usually do not. No one gasped dramatically. No one slammed a fist on the table. The room just got quieter. And quiet, when the truth is sitting in a folder, can be brutal. Then Elaine opened the second folder. Marcia Bennett explained RL Development Advisory in the dry, patient voice of a woman who had followed too many men through too many bad hiding places. She showed how a portion of Robert's income had been redirected to the LLC before support calculations began. She showed payments moving through a secondary account. She showed personal expenses dressed up as business spending. Not once, not by accident. In a pattern. Robert stared at the table. That was the first time Maggie saw the confidence drain from his face. Not all at once. Just enough. Like a man realizing the story he rehearsed was not the story the records were telling. Then came the third folder. Sophie. Robert had claimed he wanted 50-50 custody because he had always been an involved father. Elaine did not argue with him using emotion. She did not call him selfish. She did not call him cruel. She used dates. School records. Medical appointments. Therapy schedules. Pickups he canceled. Parent-teacher conferences Maggie attended alone. Nights Robert claimed he had client dinners while his credit card placed him near the harbor. The judge read quietly. That silence was worse for Robert than anger. Maggie watched him shift in his chair. A small movement. Barely anything. But after 20 years, she knew the signs. Robert was looking for a way out of a room that no longer had one. Then Elaine opened the fourth folder. The child support file. Robert's attorney moved before Elaine even finished the first sentence. A quick shift in his chair, a glance toward his client. That was when Maggie knew Robert had not told him everything either. Claire Donovan had previously opened a child support matter. Then she had withdrawn it after a private payment arrangement with Robert. Included in that file was a DNA test confirming Robert Lawson as the biological father of Caleb Donovan, age 3. For the first time all morning, Robert looked at Maggie. She did not look back. There was no reason to. The truth was not sitting between them anymore, waiting to be denied. It was on the record. Elaine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Robert had called Claire a consultant. The records called her the mother of his child. Robert had called the condo a business expense. The lease called it her residence. Robert had claimed financial hardship. The LLC showed redirected income. Robert had asked for more custody. The calendar showed who had actually been doing the parenting. That was the end of the clean version of Robert Lawson. The court did not punish him for being unfaithful in some dramatic, emotional way. That is not how it works. A judge does not sit there to heal a broken heart, but the judge did take the financial conduct seriously. The account connected to the condo remained restricted while the money trail was reviewed. The funds spent on Claire were flagged as possible dissipation of marital assets. The hidden LLC was pulled into discovery. Robert was ordered to produce full financial records, not the polished version he preferred. Child support for Sophie would be calculated using a more accurate income picture, not the smaller number Robert had hoped to present. His request for immediate 50-50 custody was denied pending further review. The judge noted the caregiving history, the missed appointments, the timing of the custody demand. The difference between wanting parenting time and wanting a better financial calculation. Maggie and Sophie were allowed to remain in the home while temporary orders were in place. Robert was also ordered to contribute toward attorney fees tied to the financial disclosures he had failed to provide cleanly. It was not revenge. It was worse for Robert. It was accountability. Written in plain language. Outside the courtroom, Claire would not stand beside him. That part almost felt inevitable. She had been subpoenaed, embarrassed, pulled into the very record Robert had promised would never touch her. She did not want to be the woman in the file. She did not want the lease, the payments, the DNA result, and the private support arrangement repeated in front of lawyers. She had wanted the condo. She had not wanted the consequences. Robert's business partners started asking questions. A lender delayed a credit review. 2 clients paused new contracts after hearing there were financial disclosure issues connected to his divorce. People who once admired his confidence began looking at him like confidence might have been all he had. For years, Robert had built an image of control. Now he was explaining parking charges, condo deposits, support payments, hidden income, and a child he had kept secret from his wife and daughter. But the hardest consequence did not come from the judge. It came from Sophie. She did not scream at him. She did not call him names. She stood beside Maggie in the hallway, pale and shaking, looking at her father like she was trying to recognize someone who had already disappeared. Then she said, "You didn't just cheat on Mom. You made us live inside your lie." Robert opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. That is the thing about documented truth. Once it arrives, charm has nowhere to stand. Robert lost money. He lost control. He lost the clean story he had been telling himself. But the most important part was never what Robert lost. It was what Maggie finally got back. After the divorce was final, Maggie Lawson did not become cruel. Some people expected her to. They expected bitterness to settle into her voice. They expected her to enjoy every bad thing that happened to Robert. But life after betrayal is not that simple. She was tired. Some mornings, she sat with her coffee and felt the weight of 20 years in her bones. There were days when the silence in the house felt peaceful, and days when it felt like grief had simply learned to be quiet. But underneath all of that, there was something Maggie had not felt in a long time. Relief. The settlement was not a fairy tale. She did not walk out rich overnight. There was no sudden mansion, no perfect ending wrapped in gold. But she kept the house long enough for Sophie to finish high school. Child support was calculated from Robert's real income, not the smaller number he had tried to sell. The hidden funds were brought into the marital estate. The money spent on Claire's condo was reviewed during property division, line by line, dollar by dollar. Maggie had a clear custody schedule. She had her own bank account. She had clean paperwork on the house. She had a daughter who could sleep without hearing arguments through the walls. And most of all, she had the truth written into the record. Robert called many times after that. At first, he was angry. Then he was sorry. Then, When the anger stopped working and the apologies did not open any doors, he became desperate. One night, he left a message saying, "I lost everything." Maggie listened to it once. Then she deleted it. When he called again, she answered only long enough to say, "No, Robert. You spent everything that mattered." A year later, Maggie was working in a small accounting office that helped women understand their finances after divorce. She was good at it, not because she had studied betrayal in a textbook, but because she knew what it felt like to sit across from a bank statement and realize your whole life had been speaking in numbers you were afraid to read. She helped women find accounts, read statements, ask better questions, understand what belonged to them, understand what had been hidden from them. And quietly, day by day, she stopped trying to prove she was valuable. She already knew. Sophie began laughing at dinner again. Not every night. Healing does not obey a schedule. But slowly, the house changed. Their evenings became quiet in the best way. No slammed chairs, no hidden phones, no woman sitting at their table, waiting to be defended. No father turning cruelty into authority. Just dinner, homework, laundry, ordinary things. After everything Maggie had survived, ordinary felt like mercy. Eventually, she met a man who did not rush her. He was a widowed teacher with kind eyes and patient manners. He did not come in trying to fix what Robert had broken. He did not make big promises. He did not demand trust before earning it. He asked Sophie before stepping too close to their lives, and Maggie noticed that. She did not need to be rescued. She had already done that part herself. But she allowed him to walk beside her. And maybe that was the real redemption. Not replacing Robert, not proving she could still be loved, but learning that peace did not have to be lonely, and love did not have to feel like a negotiation for basic respect. Sometimes victory is not watching the person who betrayed you fall apart. Sometimes victory is leaving the room where they humiliated you and never again asking permission to be respected. If stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, and quiet justice remind you of the strength people find after losing everything familiar, subscribe. There are more stories where the truth takes its time, but it still arrives.